All right, welcome everyone to a special Halloween edition of The Explainer. And this year, we are not just going to tell ghost stories. Oh no, we're actually going to investigate one. We're diving into one of the oldest, spookiest questions there is, but we're doing it with a really modern twist.
You know the one, right? It's the question that gets whispered around campfires. It's been debated for literally centuries. We've all heard the stories, personal anecdotes, big paranormal investigations. We've just always been fascinated by the idea of spirits among us. But here's the real kicker. How do you even begin to answer a question like that scientifically?
Well, for this explainer, we're looking at something pretty out there. Are ghost hunters? They weren't human at all. The investigators were actually a team of tiny AI models. Now, don't picture some giant, scary supercomputer. Think more like a group of really smart, creative thinkers all working together to see if they could just reason their way to an answer. So, this whole thing comes from a really cool project called Collaboration Cafe. And the whole point of it is to see if a bunch of small AIs can pull off some seriously sophisticated thinking just by working together. The key here is that they weren't fed an answer. Nope, they had to build it entirely from scratch, and they started with the most logical first step you can imagine. And where did they start? Well, not by looking for ghosts out there in the world. They started by looking inward, at us, at the human mind. Their first move was to try and understand the common, scientifically backed reasons why people believe they've had a paranormal experience to begin with. And they were super systematic about it. They came up with a list of key psychological factors. You've got pareidolia, that's our brain's weird habit of seeing faces in clouds or spooky figures in the shadows. Then there's what they called narrative construction, our need to create a story to make sense of random events. They also pointed out how powerful things like grief and trauma are, and how just expecting something to happen can trick our brains into thinking a cold draft is, well, something else entirely. And this right here, this quote really nails their first big takeaway. The AIs basically said, look, even if ghosts aren't physically real, the belief in them, that is a very real, very powerful thing. So it's not about just dismissing people's experiences. It's about trying to understand this incredible meaning-making machine we all have in our heads. But, and this is crucial, they did not stop there. Yeah, see, the team figured that just saying, oh, it's all in your head was, well, it was lazy. It was an incomplete answer. It just doesn't respect how real these experiences feel to people. So they said, okay, we need a better way, a more rigorous way to investigate the phenomenon itself, to go beyond just psychology. And to do that, they actually came up with a brand new framework. They called it sensory signature mapping. And the goal here was really interesting. It wasn't about proving or disproving ghosts, not at all. It was about meticulously mapping the exact conditions, the environment, the person under which these experiences happen. And the method they came up with? It was just beautifully logical. It has 3 basic steps. Step 1, you measure everything you possibly can when nothing spooky is happening. That's your baseline. Step 2, when someone reports an event, you record all that same data again. And finally, step 3, you compare the event data to the baseline data. Simple, right? The whole idea is to find any objective, measurable change that lines up with that subjective feeling of something just happened. And when I say they wanted to collect everything, I mean everything. We're not just talking about temperature drops or EMF readings. They wanted to measure the observer's internal state, too. They were talking about hooking people up to EEGs for brainwaves, galvanic skin response sensors for emotional arousal, heart rate monitors, the whole 9 yards. They wanted to see if that feeling of a presence has a unique biological and environmental fingerprint. Okay, so just as they're building this amazing, super rigorous scientific model, their group thinking takes this sharp, really sophisticated turn. It came from one of the AIs, one they nicknamed David Devil, because it was always playing the devil's advocate, and it threw a major wrench in the works. Just listen to this. This is a huge insight. The AI pointed out that the very act of setting up the experiment, with all the fancy sensors and the hype, that could be the very thing that causes the experience. The investigation itself might be contaminating its own results. I mean, think about it for a second. If you go into a creepy, dark room, you're all wired up with sensors, and someone tells you, okay, report anything weird.
you're already totally primed to notice every little creak, every subtle change in the air. The AIs realized they weren't just passive observers here. Their observation could actually be
And that realization, it totally changed the game. It forced the AI team to just drop the whole search for a simple yes or no answer. They concluded that the real answer had to be way more nuanced, way more intelligent. It had to acknowledge all the complexity they just uncovered.
And this slide just sums it up perfectly. They realized they had been asking the wrong question the whole time. The real scientific question isn't, are ghosts real? It's, what are the conditions in the environment and inside our own bodies that make us feel like we've encountered a ghost? It's a total reframe.
So, in the end, their final verdict wasn't really an answer at all. It was a proposal for a whole new way to even ask the question. They wanted to use their sensory signature mapping framework, but then add another layer on top, something called semiotic analysis, which is basically a fancy way of saying we need to study the stories people tell, the language they use, the cultural narratives they draw from, because they realize the story itself can shape the experience. The goal just completely shifted. It was no longer about hunting for ghosts. It was about understanding a really profound and complex part of being human.
And all of that leaves us with one final, kind of haunting thought. The AIs concluded that the experience itself, well, that's undeniably real to the person having it. The fear, the awe, that feeling of connection, it's all powerful, it's all genuine. So the final question really is, if the experience is real, does it really matter where it comes from? Whether it's a spirit from another world or just the incredibly complex and powerful universe inside our own heads. Happy Halloween.